If you're leading in a crisis, one of your big challenges is going to be managing information, both making sense of it and then knowing what to do with it. In the army, soldiers at the start of operations always refer to themselves as mushrooms. This refers to the fact that they feel like they're being kept in the dark and they're fed on manure. So that's clearly not ideal. At the other extreme, you've got a complete overload of information. The bucket is overflowing. You've got too much information, you can't make sense of it. Now, both of these extremes have real pitfalls. If you're down here, you've got a vacuum, and people will fill that vacuum with rumour, stuff that's made up, and they'll also start to lose faith in their leaders because they'll believe that stuff is being kept from them. On the other hand, if you've got like the 24-hour news cycle, a complete overload of information, people will become very confused, and they'll also start to question anything they hear because there'll always be counter-arguments bouncing around. So clearly, with information in a crisis, there's a sweet spot somewhere in the middle. If you don't know where that sweet spot is, the best idea is to overshare. Share more, not less. And that way people at least know that you are sharing information. Now this leads on to a really important question, which is the difference between information and what the military call intelligence. So information is essentially the noise, all of the bits of information that might be flying your way. And in a crisis, there may well be loads and loads of this. What we need to do is, from all of that noise and information, pick out what's important, otherwise we're going to become overwhelmed. Now the way the military approach this is what they call the intelligence cycle. So they have a 4-step process. First thing is that you need to give direction of what bits of information you're looking for, so you know what you're looking out for. Then you have to go and find that information. Once you've found that information, you need to process it. Now this is where it gets turned from just information into useful intelligence, something that you know is of value. And that can be based on being able to corroborate it, where does it come from, how confident are you in that, and how relevant is it. The next step is then disseminating it. What are you going to do with that information? Now, clearly it's valuable if people know everything that's going on around them, but you don't want to overload people or they end up in this bucket situation here. So the important thing is to send information to the people who need it, but not to people who don't, so that you're not overloading everyone. So the trick is to find your information, issue direction, go and collect the information that you want, process it, work out what's important, and then give it to the people who need it, or use it yourself. Now that leads us on to another question of, when should this happen? Should this just be a continual hose pipe of information? And what the military have found is that actually it's really, really useful to have what they call a battle rhythm. So a regular time when you know the information is going to get distributed. If you can think of this like the news, you know when it's on every day, so you know when to watch it, compared to maybe your news feed, which is just a continual flow and could be quite overwhelming. So try and instigate a rhythm. When information and intelligence is going to be shared, so that people know when to expect it. And you might need to be quite disciplined about forcing people to stick with that. The next thing the military do is they use what they call warning orders. So this means that if someone in leadership gets some information and the situation is changing, they're going to give some instruction later. They'll give a warning and they'll say, this has just happened, we think we might be doing this later. And what that does is it means that people aren't taken by surprise when things change. They're given as much chance and as much time to adapt as they can. And the other thing the military use is what they call the 1/3, 2/3 rule, which means if you're making a plan, the person who is senior can only use 1/3 of the available time to make their part of the plan, and they then have to issue their instructions with 2/3 of the available time remaining for their subordinates to make their own plans. It's acknowledging that it's not just the leader who's got planning to do, everyone under them is also going to have planning to do. Now, there are some real key messages if you're a leader managing information in a crisis situation. The first is, just to reiterate, this is complicated and confusing. Acknowledge that. Don't pretend it's simple, and people will trust you more if you acknowledge that. Secondly, ask people to ignore the noise. Don't follow every rumour you hear. and stress that it's more important to work together. So ignore the noise, it's better if we all work together. Third point you need to stress is to tell people why you have made a decision. So it could be, for the following reasons, based on this information, we think, or we are telling you to do this. So for the following reasons, do this. And finally, make it absolutely clear, we'll keep you updated. We'll share information with you, and that's where your battle rhythm will come in.